Hello and greetings to all of you here today. Thank you for being able to click my video, like and subscribe if you haven't. Thank you so much for the support. It's been a while since I had a larger mixture of books, but today I'm going to give that to you. The ABC Murders. Let's start with that. As you might have known, I've been reading through all the Hercule Poirot Agatha Christie books. And I think I've gotten through 15 or 16 of them now. I have some that are kind of out of order and some that are in order. The ABC Murders, this one reads so much differently to me than a lot of the other ones, because usually it's like you're gathered in a space and there's one killer and you have to figure out who it is. And this one, it's quite a bit different. This goes through Arthur Hastings' perspective, which we've had him here and there in the books. He's kind of like the Watson to Sherlock Holmes. There's a murderer out there. He has left a letter after someone dies, and it is an ABC letter, they call this. So this is an order of the alphabet. So everyone that dies has the first name of the first letter in the alphabet going into the next one and the next one and the next one. The first victim was Alice. Poirot is trying to figure this out. And the title of serial killer didn't exist when these books were written. It came upon later. But I feel like a lot of serial killers did get some of their inspiration from this type of story. And that's kind of sad because so many of them wrote letters and wanted fame of some sort. And that's what you see in this book. So there is a cast of characters throughout this. Through every murder, there are people. So there are a lot of characters, and I struggle to follow through with reading all of that. But this is a cat and mouse type of chase to try to figure out who this is, so that way there aren't more murders. So every letter, it's like, whoa, we really have to stop this now. As fascinating as the story was, because there were so many characters, and it just, the details got lost once in a while. It was kind of dragged. It didn't suck me in. I was really hoping for that, but it was a really interesting tale. Kind of in that mode, I'm gonna do something that's kind of like NCIS. This is a book that the publisher sent me to review. This is a newer book that came out recently. It is a Christian thriller of sorts, or a mystery, and it's a contemporary story. So the idea is that there is this man, he's named Stryker, and he has this facility, a gym, to try to get these kids that are troublemakers off the street. And instead of them going into juvenile detention, they are able to be a part of his program so he could help them out. And in doing so, he witnesses to them. He had people years earlier that were in his program that now are doing things for the government, policemen, and things like that. So Luna, she goes to this diner. At the diner, she's waiting for Stryker to arrive, but instead this other man that she grew up around and hasn't seen in years shows up, and she's like, why is he here? And then they see Stryker, but he gets kidnapped, like in front of them with like a taser. And you're just like, would this really happen, where people just out in the open kind of grab someone in front of other witnesses like it's no big deal? Right away, like, I thought it was really cool how this built up the story in the diner. But then I was like, this is already not realistic to me. Yes, it could happen, but I don't know. Along the way, we find out more about these two characters that were in the diner waiting for Stryker. Luna, we know she's looking for some sort of story from her past, some answers, but she's also trying to decide if she wants to stop and leave the job that she had been a part of too. While this one guy, his name is Corbin, and he's been pining over Luna for a long time, and he misses her. So when he sees her, he's kind of like, whoa, blast from the past. The two of them have to team up to try to find Stryker together, but in the process, they find so many different details about what is behind this kidnapping. They need to solve this problem. Forgot to say this when I recorded it. This book is called Girl Lost because they are trying to find this one girl named Trinity. She's been missing for a little bit, but there's also a policeman's daughter who's been missing as well. Why are these girls lost? Are they connected to Stryker being missing? So there's a lot of stuff in this about Christianity and faith. There's a lot of forgiveness throughout it, and it was actually very touching, very lovely. I enjoyed the story because I read a lot of books about, for instance, human trafficking and situations in real life that have occurred. It was a little bit of a struggle for me at times to be like, I don't know if it would be so easy to figure that out, or like it seems like a rushed story at times. And it was kind of short, but it was also not pieced together I don't believe in the right way. There's just a lot of violence. I don't appreciate Christian stories having like a justified murder, even though I don't care if you're a police or not. To me, there's no justification to taking someone's life, especially if you're going to talk about forgiveness when we don't know anything about the person that was involved in that. It bothers me. And I don't know if it's just because of my being a Mennonite and how we view as everyone being a person made in the image of God, that we don't believe in taking anyone's life at all, ever, that this bothered me. So this, for me, to read a Christian story like this was not good. I didn't really enjoy it. I was hoping to. Parts of it I enjoyed. There were just so many fighting scenes in this book. And I do think that it ended very cute, also unrealistically, but very cute, because I feel like suddenly everything has like a band-aid on it. Everything's great. And I think there would be a lot of therapy involved and a lot of healing through Christ trying to help these people through the situations that they all endured to get to where they were. I don't know if it would be so like instant, like, yay, everything's hunky-dory now. I struggled with this book, but it wasn't terrible. I want to talk about the Maine woods. I have been reading this a little bit too long, and it wasn't even that long of a book. In fact, this one, I thought they were like photographs. These illustrations were just so beautiful that they looked like photographs, but I was like, photography was like just starting. It wouldn't have been this good. Yeah, so I read this on my Nook. It was very informational, and I love Henry David Thoreau quite a bit. There were things in this that I thought were really beautifully written. I do like his writing, and I love Maine. It's my favorite state to visit. I've been there multiple times, and it was kind of cool to see like uninhabited version of Maine. Now, Maine used to be just Massachusetts. It became Maine much later. And so this book is from the 1860s, I believe. And so Henry David Thoreau, he is going to be visiting people he knows, relatives, I believe. And when he goes, he gets kind of this time to spend night in the woods for several weeks while learning more and observing things in the woods of Maine. Now, there's something that you have to know about Henry David Thoreau. He is an abolitionist. He was very well known for being so, and this book was written right in the midst of the Civil War. He doesn't really talk about that, but you have a lot of Native American people that he interacts with, and he tries to understand them. And he even, instead of like making an English sounding word, he tries his best to take what is told to him and tries to get the pronunciation. When he's writing, he'll say, this native, he was talking to me and he said this, and I repeated it, and we kept going back and forth until I said, does this sound right? And then they nod like yes. So he's like writing based off of how he was taught how to say it, and I appreciated that. That was really cool. There was also like this part where he's talking about the logging industry. I don't think about that these days. You don't really think about logging so much. Yes, it exists, but it's just kind of when you have guys that are on top of logs balancing, and they're on the water trying to bring the logs down the river or wherever type of body of water. And that picture, the imagery that he paints is just really well done. But this is a very boring book. It's kind of slow. You just get a lot of, this was a moose. I didn't know what a moose looked like. And he's explaining what the moose and how they eat the moose and different stories about the moose. He's talking about the guys he interacts with while he is in Maine. I think like the idea of how Maine used to be was fascinating. Kind of was like a journal without being a journal. I think this comes out on Tuesday, tomorrow then. This video comes out on Monday, on the 18th. I didn't look at a calendar today to know. Hearts in Circulation, this is one of the books I had been looking forward to for months. I pre-ordered this. I was so excited about it, and it didn't disappoint me. And I was so happy because I feel like I've been a little bit disappointed by some books. I have DNF'd so many books lately. Well, not so many, but a few books lately, even ones that I've owned for a little bit. And I'm like, I can't get into this. But this I got into. This is a beautiful story. This is very cute. Bookmobiles. I have to give you a little history of myself with a bookmobile. When I was in kindergarten and in first grade, I went to this one school where there was a bookmobile from the local library, and it would come and we would go in and we would borrow books. We would look through, and I thought it was such a cool idea. I loved it. And then when I went to a day camp at that same location a little bit later, they still did this, and then they stopped, and then we used to walk and take like a scenic walk to the library. I loved that because this is what got me starting to enjoy books, made me fascinated with the idea of books. So let's give it up for bookmobiles. You should exist. You should continue on. So here in this story, this is Haley. She works for a library. She's in the circulation, and she has this bookmobile that was provided by the library to reach different areas of that were kind of deep, or she might have been in like the Carolinas, because they do mention the area close by Cherokee. So it's in the mountains by the Smoky Mountains. So it was cool because she went to like this back road area. But when she gets there, the road has like a collapse of rocks and stuff right behind her as she's like breaking down. And she's like, wow, okay, well, what am I going to do? And she doesn't really get service too well. She's calling and gets this tow truck that's in the town that she stops in. And we have Levi here. Now, I gotta give you a little background. Levi, he has a sensory situation, which I'm new to learning. I knew someone that had a sensory issue when I was in my 20s and they were a teenager. And I was like fascinated by the idea because I had never heard of such a thing. And now I hear about other people that have these issues. So he is someone that kind of tends to be a loner because he doesn't want to like weird people out, but he's helpful. Haley here, she had a medical situation. It kind of still is an issue that she's worried about. So we find out about their backstories. Levi offers, because he's a mechanic, he has to fix her bookmobile, and now the road is cut off. He has to try to fix this, and she has nowhere to stay. There are no hotels in the area. He has a room, and he's like, well, you could stay with me. She's like very uneasy about that, and he tries to like make her feel a little bit better, but eventually she stays there. He has like extra clothes because he has sisters. While he has this woman in his home, he has a hard time communicating with her, and she talks. She is quite a talker, and she's just gabbing. And he, with his sensory, he kind of can't take that. So then she starts to feel hurt. So they learn how to communicate with each other, and she is stuck there for a while. And then they learn so much about each other, and the way that their bond of friendship starts, I really think it's very cool. I think it's done right. This is a Christian book, and I feel like there's not a lot of it, but near the end, there's like a whole situation where there's a lot of talk about God. The main idea of this book is to trust God through things, to not worry so much, be willing to communicate if you have a worry to someone and that they can help you. I thought it was a very touching and lovely story. I got through it pretty quickly, and I'm one that doesn't really read a lot of contemporary stories, but this was a very fun one, and it's seasonal. Look at the beautiful tree of autumn here in the background. It came out at the perfect time. I will say though, there are some like heavy duty kissing scenes, and the way things are described, I feel like there might be a little bit too much touching for a Christian story. So be aware of that. It's like clean, but it's just like, whoa, that was like back up, But it was a very good story, and I loved it. Guys, I have a 5-star read. Oh my word. This is the 5th book that I have given 5 stars to this whole year, and I've read over 200 books this year. So that is really, really low when you think about it. But I was also given this to review, and this book this is a brand new book. I started reading this the day it came out, but I was sent it like a few days before that. But I started reading it November 4th, and I finished it the next day. This was amazing. The Fault Between Us. This is set in 1959. It is based off of true things that happen at Yellowstone National Park at one of the campgrounds that are nearby. This starts off talking about 3 sisters and how they were raised when they were really little. Their mother leaves and their father raises them. And it's a very sad situation. And while I'm reading that, I'm like, wow, I'm a mother of 3 myself. I cannot imagine being a mother and leaving my children like that. It's kind of heartbreaking. But then right away it goes into their adult life. So now we have Claire, who's the oldest sister. Claire is married with a baby. Baby is only a few months old. She loves her husband and she is loving being a mom, but they have financial difficulties, pretty big time. And she was raised by a father who owned his own store, so he had some money and he wants to provide for his kids. He's very much into finances. So her husband, his name is Red. So we learn the perspective of both of these 2 people, Claire and Red. But then we also get the perspective of the 2 younger sisters, Bridget and Franny. So Bridget, she's a nurse. She was told by her father, can you please go to Claire, try to bring her home with her husband or not? She's like, oh yes, daddy, because he's done so much for her. She wants to be be an obedient child. And there is a hospital in Yellowstone in the area where her sister lives. So she goes, but Franny, the youngest, who's only 18, she has to tag along. She does not want to do that. She's like this girl that loves rock and roll. She wants to have fun. And she's like, oh, daddy-o, you know, she doesn't say that, but you know, that's what my head was thinking when I was reading it. You're ruining my fun. So she tags along with Bridget. They go to Claire. They love their niece. They had never met her before. Her name is Jenny, cute little baby. And they get established there in different ways. So Bridget gets established at the place where she's working, and Franny, she kind of decides that she wants to be a little bit like Claire and work at this one place that she had heard Claire talk about so much in letters. Well, I'm going to get a job. And then, you know, Claire is there trying to do her best, but then Red, there's like tension between them. So this is the first half of the story, this building up of understanding the characters. And it was really, really well done. And I had no idea what was going to come. And I'll just say that the rest of the story, halfway point, pretty much a little bit at the halfway point, they have this situation that is historic. It was an earthquake that occurred. They give detailed descriptions of what people went through, and these sisters are a part of this story. This is a whole bunch of like a rescue story in this, and we have the weather. And it's funny because I had done that weather tag and I was like struggling to find a weather book, and now I have one. This is like my favorite book that has a weather situation, a natural disaster that occurred. The way the descriptions were of what was going on during that time, I was so sucked in. Now being into these characters too, I feel so attached to them. First off, this is a very Catholic perspective. I'm not Catholic, and so the denomination of Catholicism has the faith in Jesus. So you're going to see that in this book. It was really well done. I really enjoyed the idea of faith and God really exists. Does he care about me? Where has he been? That kind of thing is throughout the book. Content-wise, there is one scene where Franny, she's in like this dorm filled with women and they're kind of like not wearing much. And so she just talks about how like it's no big deal for them. Like for her, it's a little bit because she's not used to it, but they're kind of like whatever. And so that's a little weird. So there, that is mentioned. But then later on, there's a situation because of this earthquake that happened. There were hurricane-like winds that kind of took clothing off of actual people, like in the event that actually happened. Some of them lost clothing. Now it's very, very late at night that this happened. So it's dark. So people don't really see what's going on. But there is a character that has just underwear on through like different scenes. So just keep that in mind. But no one is looking at her sexually. No one is trying to stare or looking away even. They're just doing their best to help each other. Keep that in mind. That is the only content that you get in this book. There is talk about some scary situations and death because this is a real thing that happened. So I'll leave it at that. But I loved the story of redemption in this too, the story of forgiveness, the story of love, the story of sisterhood, and the story of the bonds that they had made together because of this situation especially. It was so good, and there are some sad parts, and I was just like, wow, I cried. I'm about to tear up, guys. I felt overwhelmed when I was reading this because it was so good that when I was done, and even when I wasn't done with this book, I started looking up information about this actual event that happened. I was so glued to finding out more. This was an amazing book. If you like Christian stories about real historical events that took place, this one is for you. It is so good. And I'm saying that because I like never give 5-star reviews. And here we have it. The Fault Between Us is incredible. The Woodlanders, this is a Thomas Hardy book. This also is in my autumn reading challenge. So I have 2 in this review. That leaves me with 1 more, guys, which will happen next week because I'm reading the last book right now and it's a quick read. We are almost done. I'm so happy that I made my goals. Plus I read so many other books on top of it. It's crazy. Like my goal was 42 books. I don't even know how many. There's probably been like 60 books or more for all I know that I just read since September. I'm just on fire and I'm loving it. So The Woodlanders. This is Thomas Hardy is the guy that wrote Tessa of D'Urberville, which was also on this list of my 42 books. I don't know why I put 2 of his books. I didn't even know it at first. And then when I started reading Tess, I was like, oh, let's see what's left on my book list. And I was like, oh, this is also Thomas Hardy. So this book is way less depressing than the Tess of D'Urberville book that I read. The Woodlanders, so there is stuff about the woods. Grace is the main character in this. She is growing up. She had been close to this one young man that her father kind of tells her, wants her to marry him. At the time, she's like young, so she doesn't think about it. Years have passed. The interest is there on the man's side still. They grew up together, so they're close in age. But then there's this doctor that shows up. So Giles is the one that she has grown up with, and Edred is the doctor that shows up. And he is also interested in Grace. He has a better financial situation than Giles. So the father is like, you should marry this man. And so she goes, yes, daddy, whatever. And this is very much like a tale where I could not feel sorry for anyone. At first I did. As I started reading this, Grace, I felt sorry for because there's a lot of problems with her husband having infidelity issues. My heart went out to her. But then later on, as it goes on, I'm like, I don't feel sorry for you. And Giles, he moves on the best he can, that he doesn't get the girl that he had wanted. And so there's this tension that is built between him and the father and Grace and the doctor. But then there's Grace and her feeling like she's been abandoned and neglected. And daddy, why did you do this to me by setting me up with this man that doesn't care for me enough? But then the story, like there's some crazy things that happen. And then the end, it's like kind of like a cherry is put on top at the end. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to think about this. So that's how I felt about the book. I don't know what to think about it. It was well written. I always feel like I can understand Thomas Hardy's characters pretty well. There was a problem. I felt like divorce, I guess, had been just brand new. It's brought up in here. There's also the idea of like how marriage is viewed. Does it really matter? That kind of thing. I didn't like the background type of idea that was trying to be portrayed. So I'll just say that. Yeah, so this was written in 1887, by the way. An Untidy Faith. I have owned this for a couple months and I was like, I gotta get to this before the end of the year. Get this off my shelf. And I'm glad I did. It was really well done. I have talked previously about reading some theological books and how so many times they'll do quotes from all these people. This is completely quoted from scripture throughout the book. The entire book has scripture to proclaim her ideas and her thoughts. And I thought it was great. Now, Kate Boyd, she has been in the mission field. So this is her perspective of missions from being raised in the US and being that good girl rule follower, and how she's now understanding when people have these thoughts and struggles with having deconstruction, and how she doesn't really blame these people for their deconstruction because she sees that there's something wrong in how our country handles mission work and the gospel, because she also talks about when she's in other countries and how they handle it and how they deal with persecution and how much different it is and how much harder it is, how she's learned so much from these people in South Asia. And she compares a lot about Christianity in the US and the problems with it, with the nationalism, and how it gets a lot of putting the kingdom of God in the background as if it's less important. I really loved how she talked about humility throughout this book, and how Christ was not trying to be, I'm so great and I've done this and that, but instead he says, you have to be a servant. I'm a servant. I came to serve, and that we are supposed to live that example. And so she paints that picture beautifully. There's a quote I have a quote book where when I'm really in love with a quote, I write it in this book, and I don't have a lot in there, and I've kept it for like 15 years or 10 to 15 years. And this now is a quote that I have from this. I typed it up so I could read it off my screen a little more easily while holding this book. The kingdom is not about turning the world into our empire in God's name. It is not about climbing our way to greatness. It is about cultivating a life and community of goodness. That is what stands in the end. The kinship of God is displayed now in how we choose to live under God's rule, and in the future when the kingdom has come in its fullness. The kingdom of good will find it often has ramifications. And if we are to take Jesus seriously, those ramifications are unlikely to look like our dominion or prosperity. Wow, that is powerful. Thanks so much for being here for my reviews. I hope that you got something from it and that is now a book that you really want to read, or that maybe you've read and that you're like, well, I thought differently, or like, oh, I always love to hear rebuttals, or like, yes, or if you're like, I haven't read any of these, but they sound interesting and maybe I'll read one. I love that because I love learning from you guys of books that you read that maybe I might or might not want to read too. Bye, everyone.